Yes, indeed, just as 60s rock legends, the Zombies, famously saying it's the time of the season for loving. Valentine's Day 2024 is now just a week away, so it is time to get those flower orders in, the dinner reservations made, and all those thoughtful cards purchased. And here now to show some curious love for February 14th is the guy behind GBH's Curiosity Desk, Edgar B. Herwick III. What's up, Edgar?
How you doing, Adam?
Good.
You know, if you are writing out a card to one of your loved ones this Valentine's Day season, take a moment, if you would, and show a little love for the city of Worcester, which is essentially the birthplace of the American Valentine industry.
Worcester is.
Worcester.
Because I tend, and I'm probably going to get angry emails or calls, I don't think of Worcester as a wildly romantic place.
Well, it's basically back in the 1840s when America didn't have much of a Valentine itself. We're talking about like greeting card kind of Valentine, like sending a Valentine. There wasn't really much of an industry here, but in Europe, what had become popular were these like very romantic, sort of lacy Valentines. And there was a woman, Esther Howland. She was a graduate of Mount Holyoke. And at the age of 19, as the story goes, she got a Valentine, one of these European Valentines, and thought, you know what, we could do them here. So she started sort of making them in her house. Her father owned a stationery store. She built it up into a whole industry. Eventually, she teams up with some other people from the area, formed the New England Valentine Company in 1879. And for about 100 years, like, the center of the American-created Valentine industry was happening in Worcester.
That's very cool.
If you visit the Worcester Historical Museum, they have an incredible collection of these vintage Valentines even today, which you can still see.
You are piquing my curiosity.
That's what we're going for here.
So
here was my premise, though, Adam. I was thinking everybody's going to be showing love to Valentine's Day, but I thought we would take a little tour through February 14th in history.
Okay.
With a little fun true and false of things that have nothing to do with Valentine's Day, but happened or didn't happen on February 14th.
Okay, that works for me in part because I'm so bad at executing Valentine's Day. So, yeah, let's do it.
So, true or false? We'll start here with this one, Adam. True or false? On February 14th, 1752, nothing of note happened in Massachusetts or any other of the British colonies because there was no February 14th in 1752. True or false?
I don't know why there wouldn't have been one, but I like the idea of there not being one, so I'll say true.
It is false, but you're kind of right, because there were days missing in that year. So we went from September 2nd to September 14th in that year.
What?
Yeah, missing days. Totally missing days. And this had to do with the fact that we used to be on something called the Julian calendar, which was Julius Caesar, right? The rest of the world, I shouldn't say the world, the rest of Europe switched to something called the Gregorian calendar sometime in the 1500s. The English didn't do it until later, and it had to do with, you know, we're basically on a solar system here. We're trying to follow the solar year. The Julian calendar kind of had the numbers wrong, and we were slipping off from the solar calendar.
So we just cut out 2 weeks.
Yeah, so the Gregorian calendar fixed that, but by the time we got around to fixing it here, we had to cut out a couple of days to get back on track.
Well, fortunately, we're more on top of problems these days.
Yeah.
Tackle it nice and early. Okay, what else?
Okay, true or false? You ready for another one here?
Yep.
Here we go. Let's bring it up on the screen. True or false? On February 14th, 1859, Oregon was admitted into the Union as the 33rd state.
I don't remember this being part of Oregon Trail when I played it as a kid, but I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes.
That is true.
True.
You are correct. Now, we should say the entrance of Oregon into the Union is sort of a fascinating and I think undertold piece of our history. So if you look at that year, you'll maybe note that this is pretty close to the start of the Civil War. And this is a period of time when the United States, as they were bringing states into the Union, there were all these deals happening to kind of balance so-called free states and so-called slave states that were coming into the Union. So Oregon comes into the Union as a free state. And I think the deal had something to do with some southwestern states opening up as slave states. However, Oregon's Constitution, when they come into the United States, says there is no slavery in Oregon, but it is also illegal for black people to come into Oregon. No new black residents in the state of Oregon. And they also were no longer, if they were living there, they couldn't own real estate, they couldn't make contracts, they couldn't vote, they couldn't use the legal system.
Good God.
And this stretches back a couple of decades. Even when it was a territory, they had these so-called exclusion laws on the books in Oregon. Now, of course, the Civil War eventually breaks out. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, they supersede state law in Oregon. But it's one of those pieces of history that I don't think a lot of people
know about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty. It's interesting. What Oregon has done. I think in 2002, voters, even though the law had long been superseded, they put a vote in place where they said, we're going to take all of this language out of our Constitution, even if it's a relic. And the Secretary of State website in Oregon does a really nice job of being very honest about this racist past. They have a good timeline about what happened, and they have a section where black Oregonians who were living there at the time are detailed their life, their history, what they know about them.
That's interesting, and in part because I think of Oregon as this kind of progressive mecca. I probably really think of Portland as a progressive mecca, and I know that Portland is not the entire state, but such a radical difference between that and what you described.
It is also still, as you see the long arm of these things, it is still one of the whitest states in the union.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, interesting. You want to do another one?
Yeah.
One more true or false?
Well, at least one more.
Okay, true or false, Adam? True or false? February 14th, 1876. Both Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray filed for patents for their invention, the telephone, on the same day.
Is it bad to admit that I'm not familiar with Elisha Gray?
Well, no, I think that's kind of part of that's part of why I bring it up.
Then in that case, all right, you gave me a little something to
learn
work
a little bit more about.
Then in that case, true.
It is true. It is true. So as you say, Elisha Gray, not quite as well known as Alexander Graham Bell. They do both file for this patent on the same day. Neither of them had made the telephone work yet. Eventually, this is something that ends up playing out in the court for years. Apparently, you know, I don't know that we even know to this day, but Alexander Graham Bell maybe had an inside deal with the patent office, maybe got a look at Elisha Gray's drawings, and it was shortly thereafter that he finally got the telephone to work. And so eventually in court, Alexander Graham Bell is the person who's awarded the patent. Apparently, when he actually makes the thing, out available to the world, he's not using Elisha Gray's technology anymore. But as we can see, Alexander Graham Bell is obviously the person we know today. Elisha Gray.
Yeah, it's automatic.
Now, interesting. Did you know this is also a local story for us?
Nope.
The very first telephone call comes a couple of weeks later in March of that same year. It was placed in Boston.
Where was it placed here? Do you know?
It was like downtown. I think there's I think there's a 7-Eleven there now.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if it was the Parkman House, because it seems like literally everything happened in the Parkman House.
It could be.
And every single person who's famous in world history worked in the Parkman House or stayed in the Parkman House.
This is what the curiosity is about. Hopefully, we inspire your curiosity to go out and learn more. Also, the first telephone call, two-way telephone call, comes in October of that year, placed from Cambridge to Boston.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you imagine how enraging it would be to come up
to be
with
Elisha Gray?
Basically to be Elisha Gray.
Be like, I figured it out. It all has to do with this liquid transmitter, apparently. That was Elisha Gray's thing. And that was apparently maybe what Alexander Graham Bell then used to make it work at first, but then once he figured out he could make it work with the liquid transmitter, he went back to his technology.
But would he have gotten back to his technology in an effective way if he hadn't used the liquid transmitter?
This is one of those things. This is a very interesting story. I highly encourage people to look into it more because it's more detailed than I'm.
That is genuinely fascinating.
But that is, in industry, that industry and discovery thing is an interesting thing, right? Because figuring stuff out, the science of stuff, right, is collaborative, but the ownership of a patent and the producing of something is proprietary, and so there's that tension even today when it comes to new technologies.
This was really fun. Edgar
I'm glad to hear that.
III, thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Oh, happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, and you too.
Thank you.